it suddenly became obvious that nothing about how much of a ball ache that scene was to clean up was chance. The teeth wedged between floorboards, blood on the ceiling. Yeah, Gavin probably thought he was hilarious. He wasn't normally the pranking type. Actually, he wasn't the joking type at all. But the setup was too obvious. He'd called in sick, made the scene obviously difficult to clean, and carved his name into the ceiling. Ha fucking ha. So I called him to let him get the laugh at my expense he was so desperate for, but only so I could scold him for carving his name in the ceiling. He would know better than anyone how bad that could have been for us if the police got to the scene before. The fact it was just the two of us mean we were spread thin, and that had been happening far too much lately. We'd lost a lot of clients over the past few months. Summer makes the smells more obvious. We had to bail halfway through a job only a few weeks ago when we heard it get called in on the police tracker. No answer. I left him a message peppered with 4-letter words. The power sander did not get rid of the word well enough. The scratches were too deep. I ended up taking a sledgehammer to the ceiling to break it up. I guess my thinking was sort of like a shredder for words on paper. Break it into pieces that would be impossible to reassemble. I took out more of the ceiling than necessary just to make it look more like a structural failure. Gavin really hadn't thought this one through. When I finally got back home, my wife Lynn asked me how work was. I wanted to tell her, but she still didn't know that what I did tiptoed just outside of the law, and she would want me to call it. She'd worry that Gavin was in danger. She was kind and considerate like that. It was part of why I married her. I could tell she knew it wasn't fine though, but she also knew when I wasn't going to tell her. We ate dinner together with our little guy. He told me about daycare. I read him a story and put him to bed. I must have fallen asleep in 3 seconds flat. Breaking apart a ceiling is far more exhausting than you would think, even though it already sounds like it is. My phone went off and woke me up. Gavin was calling me, and it was around 2 a.m. Couldn't you at least wait till the morning to laugh at me? Were there any heads? What? Were there supposed to be? Uncool, man. Did you have to clean up any heads? Just tell me. No, I'm not going to fall for it. I know it was you, Gav. I could hear Gavin's breathing on the other side of the line. At first I thought he was trying to hold in laughter, but it was too fast and shallow. I broke the silence. You still there? Yeah. What's going on? If you didn't carve your name into the ceiling, then who the hell did? It's nothing. Fuck off. How did you know there were no heads? Gavin paused for a while on the other side of the line before giving in and telling me. I cleaned up a scene last week while you were taking care of the medical waste spill. Just before you got sick? I've not been sick, I've been hiding. Hiding from who? I have no idea. We both agreed to meet at the office since neither of us were going to be sleeping that night. When I got there, I made him tell me about what he saw last week. He said there had been a pile of entrails on the floor, except for their intestines. He wouldn't tell me exactly what had been done with those, but I gathered they had been strung up around the room and the decaying body parts tied up with them. Organs are slippery and hard to bag up, and intestines are the worst out of those. You have no idea how they are. We talked about how he felt like the killer was not only a sick bastard, but also specifically making it hard to clean up. Parts of the victims wedged in awkward spots and things like that, just like my scene. Also that there were no heads to be found, just like the scene I cleaned up yesterday. Then he said he found a piece of paper in one of the stomachs, and it had his name written on it. It took me a while to absorb this new piece of information as it turned over in my head. We should tell the police, I told him. Are you crazy? We're both fucked if we do that. We go to jail, and you know that it's nothing compared to what our largest customer would do to us if they even suspected us of possibly bringing the police close to them. Well, maybe they can help us? I don't know. Maybe it is just some kind of prank. They'll get their kicks and then get bored, whoever it is. Prank? It's a bit far for a prank. We both found your name. That's not funny. Gavin stared off into space, avoiding eye contact. Don't call them, okay? It'll pass. He seemed certain, if a little weary. I was starting to like this less and less. The rest of the day was quiet. One of the underground labs had a spill, nasty stuff that you have to avoid skin contact with, but not that difficult to clean up. I had no idea what they were doing with those stray dogs down there, but their careless lab assistants were keeping us in business. You just had to make sure to listen to them when they told you what you absolutely cannot mix the spillage with. I got stuck up to the knee in some rock-hard, fast-setting foam on my first job there after I tried to just hose it down the drain. Lesson learned. Late afternoon, there was an unattended death scrub down at a motel, another one of our most frequent customers. Prostitutes and junkies dying in their rooms all the time, but they can't have the police turning up. I just wish they'd call them in quicker. Must have been there 2 or 3 weeks at least before we got called, maybe a little less. It had been a hot summer. The day wrapped up and I went to meet Hardy for a beer. Gavin definitely had a hunch that's who I was going to see, but he didn't comment. He knew I had nothing against the guy, even if he was a little intense. He'd mellowed out a lot, though. Hardy knew I had nothing to do with him losing his job, so he had nothing against me either. I guess it was nice to have someone I could talk to about work and vent. Hardy was the only person I knew who wouldn't excuse themselves when I started venting about the smell and mess corpses make. I even had to spare Lynn for my work. I could tell her if it was a busy or slow day, but that was about the extent of what she was able to hear without having to excuse herself. Hardy was already in the bar when I got there, and according to the bottles on the table, he'd been there for a while. We greeted one another with one of those bro hugs where you lean forward and slap each other's backs, making sure nothing but your upper torsos and arms come into contact. Hardy has always been one to get a head start on the drinking, but he was a bit more buzzed than usual. Something about his drunkenness and the stress of the new info about yesterday was making him a bit much to handle. He has this habit of fixing you with unbroken eye contact while he both talks and listens to you. The effect of him swaying slightly while doing this and my head swimming with the scene from yesterday and Gavin's weird reluctance to tell me anything helpful was making Hardy's stare even more overwhelming than usual. "How's work been? Still stacking that paper?" he asked. "Same as always." "Don't hold out on me, bro. Your face is looking almost as long as my dick." Hardy laughed at his super original joke that implied he had a large penis. Those were his next favorite jokes after the puns. "Something ain't right. What's up? Another deadbeat dad take his family out in a motel? Lynn being a bitch?" Hardy really had a way with words. I almost clocked him for calling my wife a bitch, but I was too worn out. I weighed whether or not I should tell him about the scene. Really, it should have been up to Gavin if I said anything or not, but he wasn't around. I figured I could just leave that part out. As I told Hardy about the scene, his eyes widened. He was transfixed by my description. Honestly, I have no idea why Gavin felt he had to fire him. The guy has such a resistance to the psychological toll the job takes. He was probably a far better asset than I am. Usually, Hardy would interrupt to make a joke or ask a question, but probably for the first time ever since I met him, he was totally silent. I finished telling the story, including the fact I had to take care of it myself, but leaving out the part where Gavin's name was carved into the ceiling. I just mentioned scratches to reveal the porous plaster. Hardy sat in silence, mouthful of beer, mulling over it for a while. "You're making the blood thing up, though, right? I mean, on the ceiling? Come on, dude." "I'm serious." "Damn. How long did it take you?" "I don't know, man. It felt like forever. My arms still hurt." Hardy laughed out loud and sipped on his beer again before summing up the stress of dealing with a scene like that by yourself in just one word. "Fuck." "Yeah, fuck indeed," I joked back. We both cracked up and laughed a bit before moving on to other topics. Things were fine between me and Lynn, and little Sean was getting ready to start going to school proper, so Lynn could work again. Hardy was still single, playing the field as he put it, but I'd still never seen him exchange more than 2 sentences with a girl for all the bragging he did. We part ways and I walk to the 10 or 12 blocks home and pass out in that pleasant, mildly drunk way that you do. My hangover is rudely awoken and pissed about the next morning when my phone goes off. Gavin is calling me. "What the fuck time is it?" The clock says 1:22. Lynn and Sean are sound asleep. Gavin sounds shaken when I pick up the phone. There was another anonymous call in, he quivered. Have you gone over? Nah, I'd rather wait for you. Makes sense, honestly. If it was my name showing up at a crime scene, I don't think I'd be able to go at all.